Okay, sweet. Okay, so this was a topic that I actually did a couple years ago when I first started my business, and carbohydrates at the time were getting like a really bad rap, and it still are. And I feel like a lot of people really fear carbohydrates, but carbohydrates really like aren't the villain to every single person's story. So like within this presentation, we're definitely going to be diving into like what carbohydrates are and their importance that they have in the body's daily living and during exercise, but also how like the metabolic processes that help us get down to the roots of the issues. Because right, everybody wants to get to the root causes of things, but we have to understand that there is more than one root cause, just like there's more than one root to a tree. So there's multiple different processes that are going into what like the symptoms that a person is experiencing. So first thing we're going to really look at is the three main energy pathways. So you have a phosphagen pathway. So this is more of an anaerobic. And this is the main energy pathway with the onset of exercise, with an exercise duration of 0 to 6 seconds. So, like sprinting, shot put, like anything that's like really fast energy. So, this provides energy for short term, high intensity activities, like hit training typically, and then it relies on creatine phosphate to replenish ATP when exercising for less than 10 seconds. It's for like quick bursts of energy. So when people talk about like creatine, for example, like if you see like, I don't know, on social media, it was like creatine was blowing up, and creatine is a really good supplement, but what it's really doing is you're putting in more creatine phosphate. So the body takes that phosphate of the creatine and adds it on to the ATP. So really what creatine, like there's multiple different benefits, but when it comes to like the exercise portion of utilizing that supplement, all it's really going to do is give you a little extra push. So instead, like when you're training, you might get one or two extra reps. It's just going to give you a little bit more energy. But then after that, the body starts utilizing this system along with what we call the glycolytic pathway, which is also an anaerobic, which means anaerobic is meaning non-oxygen. Like you don't need oxygen to replenish the energy stores or for this process to work. So this is also known as glycolysis, where the body begins to break down carbs via glycogen stores in the skeletal muscles and glucose from the blood. And we're definitely going to learn a lot more about that. And this is one of the main energy pathways during activity that's where activity is lasting anywhere from like 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So like boxing matches, resistance training, soccer, tennis. So this is where the breakdown of carbohydrates via glycogen stores in the muscle, like we just said, and it comes from like blood sugar as well. Um, this is also for quick bursts of energy. And then once you surpass a certain amount of time in training, then like exercise that is lasting longer than 2 minutes, we start tapping into what we call oxidative pathways, which is an aerobic pathway, meaning it needs oxygen for energy. So this is when you start noticing like you had explained to me, Janeska, where you're like, oh my gosh, like my legs feel really heavy, or you start feeling that burning sensation in your muscles. This is when um, you're starting to run out of glycogen stores in your muscles. So that glucose that was stored as energy in the muscles is running out essentially. And so now the body is relying on oxygen to help supply the ATP or the main energy source through this oxidative pathway where the body actually starts to break down carbohydrates, fats, proteins to release the energy that is necessary to complete the task. So this primary energy pathway is, you know, it's great, but the body does start utilizing, carbohydrates and proteins once things start lasting a little bit longer. So that's why, like, walking in terms of energy, like where the body's utilizing energy, your body actually prefers to use fat stores for energy, which the body only taps into those fat stores for that energy at lower to moderate intensities. So, not saying that running isn't a good thing, but like when it comes to like weight management or fat loss, low intensity is actually better if you're trying to lose fat stores. Because that's where the low intensity, the body's going to start utilizing fat for energy instead of the carbohydrates. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So, but now let's kind of talk about carbohydrates. So, although this is what's crazy, carbohydrates technically are not an essential nutrient needed in order to survive because our body has processes to turn stored energy into fuel for the body in processes called glycogenesis, glyco I can't say this one. This one's hard. Glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis and also lipolysis. So there's a bunch of different ways that the body, it's not ideal, but like if you were in a fight or flight situation and you didn't have food readily available to you, this is where the body starts coming into play and will start acting really fast and will start taking energy from other sources in the body. So, glucose is the main source of energy for our body and the only source of energy for our brains, but which does make it essential. But in terms of survival, your body can to an extent can survive without carbohydrates because it has these other processes put into place where it will actually take certain amino acids, which are just building blocks of proteins, and convert them into glucose. So that's where there's, two main ways to also store like surplus fuel. Okay, so that's where when it comes to like weight management or weight loss resistance, we're going to dive into that. But glycogenesis, this is where your body actually converts glucose to glycogen and stores it in the liver and the skeletal muscles. And your skeletal muscles store about 500 grams of glycogen, and then the liver holds about another 100 grams of glycogen for energy. So when you start not fueling your body, this is where fueling is like really important. It will start tapping into the muscle stores and it will start tapping into the liver and start breaking those things down for energy, which is not ideal, but it is a mechanism put into place for survival. But then we also have what we call lipogenesis, which is essentially how the body utilizes fat for energy. So this is where the body will take glucose and store it as energy into fat tissue. Any questions like with that so far? No? Okay. So when the body will restore, well, I'm going to let Emily in. The body will restore glycogen in the muscles first, and then whatever is left over will actually the body will store it into fat tissue. And this is really, really important because this affects insulin and how we utilize insulin in the body and can contribute to insulin resistance. So I hope that by talking about these things, this is why strength training is super duper important, because when you train your muscles, you are depleting those glycogen stores or that stored energy. So then when you eat food, your body will store it will try to fill up those storage units in the muscles first before it starts putting it into fat tissues. So if you have a person that isn't training, regularly, and doesn't have like a ton of muscle mass, this is where, or like their energy expenditure is low and they have a surplus of energy, aka like a surplus of food or calories, that's when the body will start storing it as fat tissue. So it's not the first mechanism for the body to necessarily store excess energy into fat. It will actually try to build energy in the muscles first. So any questions with that? Does that actually make a lot of sense on why weight training is super important? Yeah. Okay. So the other mechanism that we have is glycogenolysis, and this happens in a fasted state and helps keep the blood sugar stable when glucose supply from not eating is low, or when you have like a high energy demand in the body. So this is where the body, between the meals is how it's really keeping you stable and keeping that energy stable before all of a sudden you go into like crash out. I'm super hangry and this sucks. So this is what helps keep energy stable between meals, and it also helps spare the muscles. Okay. And then you have gluconeogenesis. This is where protein breakdown happens, and we begin to break down protein in the muscles if we are in starvation. Okay. So like if we have not fueled our body for an X amount of time, and you go into like too long of a fasted state, like we said, the body will start using the energy from your muscles. It'll use the glycogen stores up, but then if it doesn't have any more reserves left, it will actually start eating away at the muscle tissue for energy. So that's why we want to make sure that we are fueled really well. It also will take energy from the liver and break down tissues there. It will also break down the GI tract as well, because your GI tract is also muscle tissue. So the body does not care about success. It really just cares about survival. So if we are not fueling properly, it will start finding that fuel and energy from other places. But this is where, in a healthy way, if you are not starving yourself, the body will break down dietary proteins to make energy for you. But what happens is, and this is why protein is really important in one way in terms of like weight management, it requires, so like you're spending more energy to make energy in the body, if that makes sense. So protein is going to take the body a lot longer to break down. And so therefore the digestive process kicks in and your body takes longer to break that fuel down, and that's going to require energy. So your body's going to burn more calories by eating protein, just in itself. Okay. Do we have any questions there? Okay.
No.
Is this like cool stuff though? I hope.
This is.
Okay. Awesome. And then we'll just go further though into like how it is utilized. So mainly stored, this is like we talked about, glycogen is mainly stored in the skeletal muscles during activities for quick energy. Okay. Traces of glycogen, like we talked about, it is stored in the liver to help maintain blood glucose levels as well. So when you're in a fasted state for too long, the body will begin to signal the liver to release glycogen and turn it into glucose via glycogenolysis. But then when the liver is tapped out of glycogen, that's when the body starts going through the process of gluconeogenesis and converting protein and then fat into glucose for energy. So when there are excess carbs coming in, the body will store in the fat for later use. One thing too, actually, I'm gonna get into this actually next, so I'm not gonna dive into it too fast. So then metabolism of glucose in the body. So what is the metabolism first off? So the metabolism is the physical and chemical changes within the cells of the body. And your metabolism is made up of all of the systems, like the physical systems within the body actually make up your metabolic rate, and how well those systems are functioning will also determine your metabolic rate as well. So but in terms of carbohydrates, glucose is needed for cellular energy. So the body does, I don't know, think about it as like a little. Do you remember those? My grandma used to have one, but it was like this little, I wouldn't even say like beacon, but it was like a dome. And then it had like all of these little red like lasers floating through it. And like if you touched it and you moved your finger, it would like follow your finger. Okay, so like that's how I think about like the cells and like the energy in the cells is like glucose is essentially like that light in there kind of doing its thing and like producing energy. But then glucose regulation happens through very sensitive hormonal systems in order to maintain blood glucose levels, especially in a fasted state. So when we think of hormones, a lot of people just think of like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. Like a lot of the times we just think of like our sex hormones. But cortisol is another hormone that has gotten a lot of popularity within like the last couple years. And I'm going to talk you guys through that. But like insulin is also a hormone, leptin's a hormone, ghrelin's a hormone. Like there's so many more hormones within the body than just those. And hormones are essentially chemical messengers in the body telling your body what to do. So when blood sugar is elevated, it will signal to your pancreas to release insulin to bring that blood sugar back down to normal levels. And then when in a fasted state and blood sugar is low, the pancreas will release a hormone called glucagon, and which then signals to the liver to release stored glycogen and turn it into glucose for energy. And with that being said, I want to dive into insulin a little bit more because this is also going to play a part into cortisol. So, insulin is the hormone released by the pancreas, like we just talked about, that moves glucose from the bloodstream into the cells for energy use. And it increases when blood sugar rises. So, like after you eat, for example, and then it lowers between meals. But insulin is an anabolic hormone. So, it stimulates growth, is like the best way to put it. So, that's why you might even see like bodybuilders sometimes, like they inject themselves with insulin because it is an anabolic hormone that stores energy when they're going through like bulking phases. Not the proper use of it, but people do it. But it also promotes synthesis of glycogen, so the stored glucose within the muscles, and um, inhibits the degradation or the breakdown of the muscle proteins within the body. So when you think about it, insulin, we want to think about equals like storage, and then glucagon equals release. So how this actually going a step further impacts the adrenals, or how the adrenals actually play a role in this is when blood sugar is low, this signals an emergency to the body. It's like fight or flight immediately kicks in, which then to the body means that physical work it is probably going to happen. So that's going to require glucose to get things done. Or if the blood sugar is dropping too low, this will equal like passing out to the body. And then that pass out can lead to like injury or like very extreme, but like potentially death, right? If you pass out in hunter and gatherer phases and you were next to a cliff, I mean, there's a possibility that you would pass out and fall off. So, body thinks of survival, okay, in terms of survival all the time. So, when the body has too low of blood sugar, right, or a fight or flight response gets released, or the brain picks that up, this is when the adrenals will release cortisol in the body. To help increase energy expenditure, right? So, like for people who are doing like intermittent fasting, for example, right? You might have that person who's like, oh my gosh, I feel so good when I'm doing intermittent fasting. Well, that's because they're getting shots of adrenaline all the time. And they feel more clear because what does adrenaline do? It increases your heart rate, it increases your breathing, it increases mental clarity so that you can get out of really fight or like those scary situations. That's all the body thinks about. So when you're intentionally fasting like that, short bursts might be great, but it can also cause harm in the long run because it has the potential to increase cortisol for too long, which then will dampen the cell's sensitivity to insulin, which then if that happens, that's when insulin resistance starts coming into play for a person. Um, and that's where, if you have been under fueling for too long, right? The body doesn't know that like you're intentionally doing that or that you're sitting at your kid's soccer game or so on and so forth. All it thinks about is survival. Um, so when those have been upregulated for too long and you see females who are like, or even guys too, who are constantly like under eating or they're going through this yo-yo cycle, it will affect that response. And then the next thing you know, everybody universally understands that they need to be in a caloric deficit to lose weight, but eventually the cells stop responding to the insulin, which then makes it so that the body's trying to store more fat anyways, because it's less sensitive to that. And then on top of that, though, it also slows your metabolic rate down. So that's why fueling and strength training is very, very important. Like it's not just a matter of, oh, I want to have nice muscles. I mean, like that is great, but there is like a really powerful process with this. And then we're going to dive into this even a little bit more because peptides are a really hot topic right now, right? And talking about insulin is really just branching off of the insulin side of it. So you actually have hormones that are produced in your digestive tract that are called incretins. Okay. And there's two primary hormones, right? You have glucagon like peptide 1, so GLP-1, and then you have a GIP, which is glucose dependent insulin insulinotropic peptide. So that was like a really big mouthful. But essentially, what happens is GLP-1 is actually produced in the gut lining, in the GI tract, and it responds to food. And it will lower blood glucose after really carb rich meals and lowers glucagon secretion. So reduces the release of stored glycogen, which is going to also slow gastric emptying. So if you're a person or somebody who is on a GLP-1, what essentially that is doing, it's slowing down the digestive process. So you might notice that like your hunger cues kind of go down, but it slows down everything. I mean, the amount of people that I see that have really low gastric emptying or slow gastric emptying from that, that is one of the side effects, which then if you are not like if that is slowing down, that can cause room for bacterial overgrowth, which also could have been part of the problem in your insulin response. Because if your gut is out of whack, that also, and that bacteria is out of whack, that's going to affect your GLP-1 secretion anyways. So a lot of the times it's kind of like, okay, did people kind of just have tummy issues before? Because they might have not needed it. So it's like, okay, is fixing the gut the first step, for a person? Or why some people might notice like hair loss when they do like a GLP-1. They're slowing gastric emptying, creating room for bacterial overgrowth to happen, which affects how you utilize nutrients and absorb nutrients, which then is going to affect your hair. And so you might notice hair loss or thyroid issues, so on and so forth. So there's that, but you also have the GIP, which is released from the small intestines and increases insulin secretion, which increase fat stores in your fat tissue. So does anybody have questions about that, or does that kind of sum up or quiet the noise about what happens with peptides. No? Okay. So honestly, what a GLP-1 is going to do is it's like an antagonist med. So it um, works by activating the GLP-1 receptors within the pancreas, leading to an enhanced insulin release and reduced glycogen release, thereby lowering your blood sugar. Okay.
Isn't there also a GLP-3? I think somebody was talking about they're doing.
Probably, but that's probably going
Okay.
to be a little bit more synthetic. I mean, the
Okay.
GLP-1 already is synthetic, but in terms of like bodily processes, these are like the two primary hormones for a person in the body.
What's your thoughts on those?
Um, I mean, I kind of went into it. I mean, I'm a person who is pro do whatever you think is best for your body and doing that, but I think that I see a lot of people misuse them.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of other symptoms that start happening because of the utilization of them.
That's what.
And, you know, the reality is kind of like what I was talking about before. Your gut already produces it naturally. Okay. So, like, if a person potentially has tummy issues already, they might have bacterial overgrowth or imbalances that are happening which affects their GLP-1 hormone release in the body anyways. So it's like, okay, if they potentially fix their tummy issues first, this probably wouldn't even be a problem for them. And also, if you stop starving yourself, it also probably wouldn't be an issue because, like we talked about, the body is focuses on survival and it will take energy wherever necessary to survive, which means it will take energy from your digestive tract and start breaking down that gut lining, which also is responsible for this release.
Yeah, I've
And
noticed. Oh, God.
yeah, no, you're good. So that's where it's like, um, it just at that point can create a lot more issues for a person because now you're breaking down the gut lining, which is responsible for nutrient absorption, which then that nutrient absorption is going to affect hormone production. That's going to affect your hair growth. That's going to affect all other processes within the body. So it's it's a big spiral thing that
That,
happens.
yeah, that's what I've noticed with my friend. She's complaining about hair loss and a bunch of other things, and she started that, but she's like, "But I'm losing weight and looking good," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you're losing your hair and having a bunch of other health problems." So, but I mean, that's her choice. I was just
Yeah.
wondering your thoughts on it. It's like, yeah, the
Yeah.
gut health is the main thing.
Yeah, because like maybe if you asked her before, be like, hey, well, how like did you know this, quote unquote, like did you know that your gut actually produces GLP-1? And if she says no, be like, okay,
Mhm.
well, did you have tummy issues before? Right?
Yeah,
Like
she did.
was she bloated? Was she
Mhm.
constipated? Did she go to the bathroom regularly? Because if not, that's where, okay, if she probably would have taken care of that, this would have enhanced her response naturally. Would the weight loss have happened faster? Not necessarily, but it probably would have helped her manage her weight better without it
Healthier.
or even not get into that position, if that makes
Yes.
sense. Which then again, multiple root causes to a certain situation. It's like, okay, why was she bloated or constipated before? Because when a person is stressed, digestion immediately shuts off, immune system shuts off. Okay, so what in her life is causing her the most stress is contributing to those quote unquote symptoms or the response. Does that make sense? So it's like a multi-faceted thing. Like, is there financial things? Does she hate her job? Is she in a bad relationship? Is she, was she pregnant before, right? Like, did she recover after that? Like, there's just so many things that can go into it than just the weight loss.
Yeah, she was feeling her body bad and yeah, under stress and stuff. So constantly
Mm-hmm.
eating out and yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you can see like why these things happen. And it's not like a shocker. And this also is how you now have the knowledge of these things and you can run with it for yourself and for your family and pretty much anybody who's willing to listen. But at least at the end of the day, you understand it so you can feel more rooted within your body and what your body's trying to tell you. And then you can ask better questions of yourself, like if those things start slowing down or gaining weight or XYZ. It's like, okay, what has changed in my life? Because honestly, my body's just responding to something. What has changed? And then you can make those changes or have the direction based on that curiosity and the reflection through those questions. And then you can get yourself out of it. That makes sense? Stick. Okay, and then now though, in terms of carbohydrates and exercise, so the body utilizes, like we talked about, stored glycogen in the muscles first. So based on the intensity, will determine how fast we utilize those sources. So once glycogen begins to run out, the burning sensation in your muscles, this is where blood is actually becoming a little bit more acidic and starts tapping into your oxidative pathways where the body starts utilizing needing energy or oxygen to produce and supply energy. Okay. And it starts tapping into other storage units. But exercising muscles require higher uptake of glucose and have a greater insulin effect. So this is important for people who are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes, right? So that's why strength training, like I said, having nice muscles is cool, but it also has that benefit and why it's such a heavy part of our program. And then looking into things a little bit more with like the glycemic effect and index of food. And you also have what is called a glycemic load, which is pretty interesting. But this glycemic response. So this is the effect carbohydrates have on blood sugar and your insulin secretion. And then you also have your glycemic index, which categorizes foods based on the body's response to blood sugar, on like how quickly it gets absorbed within the body, right? And so like a lower glycemic response or like a lower glycemic food is what we try to prioritize for the most part because it's going to help keep your blood sugar stable, which is going to help keep your insulin levels stable, and your energy stable throughout the day. So, for a person, like, not saying you won't ever eat like naked carbohydrates, meaning like carbohydrates on their own, but like that's why pairing a carbohydrate with a protein or fat is really important because it's going to keep your energy levels a lot more stable. Your energy is going to, it's going to look more like this instead of just like this all the time. um, and so that's where pairing like an apple, for example, is like a really good one, or like strawberries or like a banana. It's pairing that with like a protein or a fat is going to help keep things like pretty stable in the bloodstream. So we're going to go into like the glycemic categories. So you have high glycemic foods, which are absorbed quickly, which raise your blood sugar quickly. So examples of that are going to be like highly refined slash processed sugars and starchy veggies such as like cereal, white bread, potatoes, right? But if you add a little bit of butter to your potatoes, that's going to affect the glycemic effect. It's going to keep it more neutral. But then also you have low glycemic foods and they're absorbed a lot slower during digestion and won't cause that quick initial spike in your blood sugar. Like how many times have you ate like a piece of candy or whatnot and just because like your energy was dipping really fast and then like 30 minutes later you're hungry again? It's because the body already ran through that energy super quick. So it's like it's not maintaining, and that's where you see people who have like sugar cravings, right? Or they're always craving carbohydrates. It's because one, the brain loves glucose, it's its main energy source, right? And so it's going to survival mode, think of the fastest way to get energy. So it's going to be the candies, the sugary drinks, all of that just kind of keeps fueling things and the body's just burning through it really fast. So then that also is really easy for you to go into a caloric surplus, which then means fat stores are going to start happening and increasing. So when you understand that process and what the body's telling you, it's like, okay, if my energy feels really low or I'm feeling really shaky, that probably is because that your meal might have had too, like the ratio of carbohydrates might have been a little bit off. So then it's like, okay, I'm going to add a little bit more fat or a little bit more protein next time. Okay. To keep that energy stable so that you're not just like always reaching for like snacks and like quick energy because there's nothing wrong with your body. That's simply just the way your body is responding and it just wants that quick energy source because it just wants to keep you alive. So examples of like low glycemic foods are going to be like non-starchy veggies, so like broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, legumes, beans, and then, like pears, apples. Those are going to definitely have a little bit more fiber in them too. So that's going to also help stabilize some things. Okay, that was a lot. So we got like 15 minutes for questions. What do we think?
I'm trying to think. I have a question, but I can't remember what it was.
You're totally good. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But